Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Empowerment Project, Module 10 on digitizing 3D collections in museums. The Digital Empowerment Project is a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations dedicated to providing free self-paced training resources focused on digital media and technology for small museums. This series of online webinars and toolkits is made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We're delighted to have you with us today. My name is Dan Yeager, and I'm the Executive Director of the New England Museum Association and your host for this final module of the series. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the places in which we gather. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute our physical sense of place, it's important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the indigenous people who have called it home. I'm speaking to you from Swampscott, Massachusetts, north of Boston, the historical homelands of the Massachusetts peoples. Wherever we are, let us acknowledge all indigenous nations as living communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We, the Digital Empowerment Project team, recognize that our organizations and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society that perpetuated the exclusions and erasures of many Native peoples throughout the United States and beyond. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. Thank you. And now for just a few housekeeping notes before we introduce today's presenter. First, I'd like to acknowledge today's ASL interpreters who will be on the left side of your screen, and let you know the captioning for today's program is embedded in a box just below the YouTube player on our website with controls to adjust your experience. Following today's program, we ask that you complete a short survey to give us feedback. We'll drop a link to the survey into the chat stream and email a link to those of you who pre-registered. We'd greatly appreciate it if you'd share your experience with us. We encourage you to pose questions to our presenter, which will be addressed at the end of the program after the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many questions as time allows. However, we may not be able to address all the questions during the live session. For this reason, we've set up an online community forum for raising questions, posting answers, and connecting with your fellow museum practitioners on the Museum Learning Hub website, which you can find at museum-hub.org. If you're looking for help between programs, please visit this forum, create a login, and post your questions. A member of the community will get back to you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker for our third module in the Tech Workshop series, Data Applications in Cultural Heritage. Harry Abramson is the Director of Art Services at Direct Dimensions in Owings Mills, Maryland. Harry provides project-specific workflows with 3D imaging, digital modeling, and digital fabrication for sculpture, monuments, historic artifacts, buildings, and antiquities. For more than 18 years, he's helped hundreds of artists, museums, foundries, and institutions from around the world with projects ranging in scale from insects, coins, cuneiform, and jewelry to colossal sculptures, a complete locomotive, historic buildings, and priceless artwork and national treasures. Harry, you have the distinct honor of hosting the final webinar in our Digital Learning Hub series. No pressure here, but I'm sure we're all looking forward to a great presentation. Harry, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I'm really thrilled and honored to be a part of this. Most likely, all of you really enjoy this field, and I do too. So it's really great to be a part of it with you today. I would like to start by acknowledging I'm here in Baltimore, Maryland, the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway people in Baltimore City. We wish to pay our respect to the elders, past and present, and the citizens of the Cedarville Band and the Piscataway Conoy, the Piscataway Indian Nation, and the Piscataway Conoy Tribe. I do work for Direct Dimensions, and we're here in Baltimore, but we do serve clients all around the world, and we travel around the country and scan all sorts of things. We've been doing this for 25 years, and there we go. That's me. We work with a lot of different industries. We've been doing this. It started in aerospace, and it developed into art and sculpture very quickly because of the need. And then we've seen a lot of different industries develop on their own because of the technology develops and then different industries adopt it. There's a lot of different types of scanners. We're really not going to get into that today. I'm personally not a technician. I'm more of a liaison between the clients and the technical people. I know how these things kind of work, but I don't even touch them. I'm not allowed to touch them. I don't know how to turn them on, mostly, except the camera. You see that in the middle. And the one thing I do want to say about the equipment is that this little graph kind of says there's different scales, and there's based on different scales, there's different resolutions and accuracies required, and you have to kind of know what you're trying to scan in order to get the right equipment aligned with the right results. That's a general thing you need to know, but we're not going to go into too much detail about that today. I'm going to start by telling a story. 2006, we were called and asked to scan the Genius of Connecticut. It's a 19-foot tall sculpture in the State House of Connecticut, and it was wanted to be scanned because they wanted to make a reproduction. This is a plaster, and the original was melted down in World War II to make munitions. So because it was plaster, it was too fragile. It's 19 feet tall. It's too fragile to put a mold on it, and plus it's in a state department, in a State House, public place, so they couldn't have all that mold material and smelly stuff. So scanning was the only option. Well, in 2006, they wanted this reproduced at a millimeter accuracy over 19 feet. That's a pretty strong request even today, but back then it was ridiculous. It took months and months of planning. It took engineers to figure out how to do this. Once we did figure out how to do it, it took a truckload of equipment. We had 5 or 6 people involved, and we had probably 20 man days on site just to capture this thing. And when it was all said and done, it took months to deal with the data. And there's a picture of the data. And there's the finished project. That's actually the bronze. We didn't make the bronze. We were responsible for making the foam that made the bronze. The reason I'm telling you this story is if I got this call from somebody today, literally, well, tomorrow's a Friday, but let's say it was a Monday, we could put a couple guys on a plane with some carry-on luggage. They'd be there overnight, be back at our place, and then a couple weeks later, we'd have the data done. That's a big change in time, and it has nothing to do with how much better at it we've gotten. It has everything to do with how much better the equipment has become, and how every day the technology options are always improving. So because of that, depending on what you're trying to do, it might be better to wait than try and force it before it's too soon. So it's a great time to look into 3D digitization because and all the possibilities it enables. But remember, it's only getting easier. And when I say it's only getting easier, doesn't mean everything's easy. There's still things that are very hard and have to be done right or else it doesn't work. But many things that were impossible literally 10 years ago, 5 years ago are easy now because the technology keeps improving. So I'm asking a question: why should you pay attention to 3D digitization? I think it offers new ways to solve problems. In some cases, empower you to do things that were heretofore impossible, and currently we can't even imagine them. But when you have this 3D data, things can be done with it. I think that it's important that you have awareness and familiarity with the technology and the industry, and it will inform you as to how it could help your organization achieve its core goals and solve problems, what level of work is required, and when it is feasible to do it right. So we believe that if you can't do it right, we shouldn't do it because we don't want to waste the time to waste your time. So some general things to remember. There's a variety of 3D digitization tools and methods all over the place, all different kinds for different industries, and we use them all. No single approach or tool can do everything. It's all getting better. It's all getting faster. It's all getting more affordable. And my suggestion is to be objective. Get opinions from different perspectives. Like with our company, we have people that are mechanical engineers. We have digital artists, architects, archaeologists, and we combine all of these mindsets to come up with the right solution to anything that we're trying to do. And as Carol Shore said in last week's presentation, don't do anything unless you know exactly who it's for and why you're doing it. And that has a lot to do with the differences in how we can scan an object in one way and deliver one type of the data, and then we scan another way, it's a different type of data. And you really need to align yourself with those things in order to know you're doing it right. So an overview of the applications that we're going to talk about today: digital archiving, online collections, open source distribution, which Smithsonian Open Access has started, exhibits, mounts and crates, digital restoration, comparative analysis, promotion, product development, accessibility, and immersive AR, VR. I might have gotten it all, but we're going to see how we go. So digital archiving is to obtain a permanent electronic digital record of an object. What if something, if something's really important, what if something happens to it? If it's changing, we want to record how it was and measure that change. Sometimes it's difficult to experience or present, and sometimes it's all above. In all these cases, we have to wonder, how good does it need to be? And it really depends on what the object is. This is the Central Park Bethesda Fountain. It's in New York City. It's part of a whole sandstone. There's a whole sandstone ornamentation all around. It's 150 years old. It's outside. And let's see if I can't get you to work with. And one of the reasons we scanned this is because, as you can see, it's changing over time. This is just the hand on one of the sculptures. So this is an 11-foot tall sculpture. This hand is probably 15, 16 inches long. And the conservator was concerned with how much this pitting was occurring and knew that, it's only going to get worse over time. And that applies to the whole, the whole sculpture and the whole sandstone environment. I think I have another one we can show you here. Let's see. No, I'm going to stick to this one. So this is an example of something that's outdoors. It's changing over time. And when we actually scanned it, it's enormous, but we still scanned it at well below 1 millimeter accuracy, which meant it was very difficult. It's very complex. It took a lot of time and effort. This is an object. It's oh boy, this is harder than I thought. So this is an object that it's Rachel White-Reed's ghost. National Gallery had us scan this because it was being put together. It was going to go back into storage, and no one knew when it was going to come back. It was very difficult to assemble. And while they had it out in public, they wanted to document it so they could have access to it again. So now they have a digital record that can be viewed without having to take it out and put it back together, which took a lot of effort, 75 pieces. That's a life-size casting of a room. This is another project where we scanned this just because. It's Horatio Greeno's George Washington. It's at the American Museum of Natural History with the Smithsonian. Again, we just scanned this because it was important, and the people that cared about it were worried. What happens if something happens and it gets destroyed? They wanted to be able to have access to it. So this digital archive is a really important aspect to scanning in general. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, Neil Armstrong Spacesuit. I want to point out that we did not scan this, but the reason I'm bringing it up is it's just a tremendous project that demonstrates so many reasons why digitization is important. So it's a permanent digital record of an object that is both important and changing over time. For conservation, it's a thorough record in existing condition of the model, the actual thing, and the 3D model allows them to compare the changes over time and possibly help the conservation to slow the most rapid changes and make repairs replicable. Also, they use this for public engagement, education, and accessibility. It was given away through the Creative Commons distribution, which is the Smithsonian Open Access Program. And it was also used for exhibition and promotion. To promote their exhibition, they created an augmented reality app, and they also made 15 full-scale replicas, which were distributed around the country. And I believe, although it's not, no one ever told me, they used this data also to help them to plan the exhibit, because they had the data. They could test and do things without actually touching the object, but they could position it and plan, and then also see specific mounting points. I'm going to show you a video from the Smithsonian, if I can. Well, maybe I will. Well, I'll show you this. This is the augmented reality. This is not this the actual spacesuit. There's a different spacesuit, but you can see here, this is an augmented reality application where someone through their phone can take the 3D data and place it into the environment where they're looking through their phone, and then view it through their phone as if it was there right with them, through their phone, through their tablet, or any camera-enabled AR-friendly app. And let me see if I can't. Oh, lost it. All right. So as I said, Smithsonian's open access program allowed everybody to download this model and do with it as they please. Also, they made 15 life-size realistic replicas, which were distributed around the country to promote the exhibition. We didn't have anything to do with that. We did help them to make the final data that they have media friendly. And here's another picture of the augmented reality app with the actual Neil Armstrong. So again, this is an example where it was originally scanned because of a digital archive, but then used for conservation, for exhibition planning, to make an AR app, to make physical reproductions, and to also enable others to have access to this data, all because of digitization. So online collections is another area of which we like. This is, I have 3D Hop, which is the 3D Heritage Online Presenter, is actually designed just for heritage applications. And this is a place where you can put your models and know that they're secure. That's one of the issues we have with museum objects, is sometimes you don't want them to have the data, be out of your control. So this is a trusted partner for that purpose. We also see a lot of models on Sketchfab. So this is, again, something I had nothing to do with. This is, I believe, in the Louvre, but a complete, there's a, so there's a whole collection of objects that have been put up on Sketchfab, and I'll be showing you more of things from Sketchfab. So as you can see, this is not ours, this is someone else, but we have our own. But this is a bunch of things from the Louvre that someone has placed up on the internet. And also, the Smithsonian has its own app, which is the Voyager app. And oh, here's my movie. I'm going to show it to you now. It's out of order, but I think it's a that's not.
Giant leap on the moon. And now the Smithsonian is documenting it like it's never been documented before, capturing it in 3D, both inside and out. Kathy Lewis is the spacesuit curator at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. The suit is made of 8 different types of materials. But over time, it's begun to deteriorate. So the team decided to do something about it.
We've been getting that high level of imagery of the suit inside and out.
The team captured images of the spacesuit using high-resolution photogrammetry, structured light, CT, and laser scanning. The data was compiled and processed through software to create a full 3D digital model, precise in capturing details down to the stitching on the suit.
We can now look inside, we can see the condition, we can see what the materials are doing, we can even detect layers.
Images can be shared online with researchers and with the general public through Voyager, the Smithsonian's online 3D viewer. With this tool, people can begin to appreciate the technology behind the suit and what it took to allow Neil Armstrong to walk on the moon.
We now have a permanent electronic record of the suit that will last forever. It will be accessible throughout the world to researchers, historians, curious children who want to see, what the suit looks like. And that's the role of the museum, to show what has been done in the past and inspire people's imagination to go on to the future.
Again, that was work that was done by the Smithsonian in-house, and we did some help with making the media-friendly files, but they did all of that scanning. You notice there was 4 different scanners they used. One was an ARM-based scanner, one was a camera or photogrammetry, one was a projected light, and one was CT scanning. So CT scanning obviously allows you to scan the inside, which was really important to this. Okay. So online collections. Oh, actually, we have more. I want to show you a virtual tour. So this is a much more elaborate application of, this is the diplomatic reception rooms of the State Department, the United States State Department. And they have all these different objects in here. And within that, you can pull them up as individuals. And in this case, here's a 2D image, but you can also see a 3D image. So, and this again is through the help of Sketchfab. And now we can see, even though you're touring a whole museum, you can look at a specific object within that tour. In this case, they've gone ahead and made a complete walkthrough of their entire space. And they've handpicked certain objects. Again, here's another one. And these were things that we helped with. We did the 3D scanning, and these are examples of very complicated, high-end work that, when you have reflective objects, highly detailed objects, it's not so simple, but there are things that are. So that's part of knowing what the challenges you're facing and whether it's achievable or not. Okay. Okay, moving along. So one note about online collections, the modern internet is built to support viewing 3D models. It makes it very easy. There is limits to bandwidth and processing power. The model that you saw that the Smithsonian made for the conservation and documentation of the spacesuit was very heavy. It's a lot of data, way too much data than you could see over the internet. So we have to rely on video game and CGI technology to make that lighter and look the same without having all that heavy data transferring across the internet. 5G will help that with mobile applications and make it so these AR apps can provide higher and higher resolution. Verizon's working on that with Smithsonian right now, and they have a whole virtual museum program as well. And I note here, the metaverse is coming. It's way too soon to know what that really means, but we know it's coming. And I think at some point, and I'll get to this later, there's going to be things that we apply in that metaverse. So moving on to another subject matter. One of the things we've done, another application is to make special mounts and crates. This is a single project I'm going to talk about. So this is Klaus Oldenburg's Red Tights with Fragment 9. It's a burlap artwork that was very fragile, probably burlap and epoxy of some sort, but the edges were very, very, very fragile, and the shape is very complex. And the museum needed to make a crate so they could ship this on an exhibition that was going to travel. So we scanned it. You can see the scan on the side, the scanner on the right side there. And then to the left is a model which we made that basically took the underside of that object and had a perfect fitting interface with hand spaces so that they could place the model or the artwork on top. And then here to the left, you can see how it perfectly fits the artwork, protecting it from bending and breaking in transport. On the right, you see it laying on top. And there it is in its crate. It's pretty simple understanding of the application, but not an easy thing to undertake. So digital restoration is an area which we've done a lot of special things in. With digital tools, you can enable redesigning an object from scratch. But when you add digitization into the original object, you can also modify the original object and repair and restore it in the digital space to a more accurate representation of what it was originally. With the help of digital fabrication, scaled and life-size reproductions of the restored condition can be realized. Due to the dimensional accuracy of potential custom fit, to the dimensional accuracy of 3D scanning and digitization, you can actually make custom fitting appliances also to perhaps put onto an original and repair damage. One of the places we did this was the Macedonian monument at the Naval Academy. This was a figurehead, a masthead from the Macedonian ship that was taken from the War of 1812. This is a sculpture of Alexander the Great. It's a war prize. So the monument had been sitting on the campus for quite a bit. The figurehead had been outside for years and years, and it decayed. There's a long story behind it. And we were brought in to make it look like the best documentation that was available. And these 3 pictures were the only documents we had to improve it. And with the help of the National Historic Trust, we were able to redesign it, and they had to approve it digitally. And then we were able to make it again. And meanwhile, they also restored the whole monument. But that's the brand new monument up there. And that was milled out of mahogany. So once we had the 3D data, we could carve it exactly as it was designed and replace it. Milled out of mahogany, which was the original material, and then painted white. Another project we did was the Caligula Sculpture, which was 2,000 years old at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Again, we scanned it, made a very high resolution model, used scholarly assistants. We're not scholars, but we are digital artists. And with their direction, we were able to design and replace all the missing elements that had broken off of the object over 2,000 years. You can see the different stages. The left is the original condition. The right is we did some work to add all these pieces, and then the far right is the finished object. We 3D printed small versions, including a colored version. You can see the very high resolution. And that was really very, very long time ago, and it was really groundbreaking when we did it. We're very proud of that. Another project which we've done recently was to replace and to restore and make a replacement of this Assyrian relief. This Assyrian relief was at the Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria, and they had it because the cuneiform language or Aramaic language on the sculpture is actually written in the Bible. So this is a 3,000-year-old relief, and they had it in their library, and they basically realized it was too expensive to even insure it, and it needed to go someplace where it could be kept safe. You can see it on the right. It has extremely high resolution, fine details, and we scanned it with multiple tools and also photographed it. On the left, you can see the original, and you can see it has a scar where it was broken into 3 pieces. And on the right, you can see the repaired or restored replica, which is actually concrete cast. The original is a gypsum alabaster stone. But the one on the right is actually a painted concrete, but we were able to restore the missing areas, again, with the help of their scholars. The digital data was converted into, was then milled into a negative that served as the casting pattern. You can see here the data of the original scan where it has the scar. And then you can see here the data where that scar has been, if you go back and forth, you can see we did repair work there. I think I'm in the wrong version of this presentation. Here is a 3D model. And you can see how high resolution we were able to document this. And again, this is through the internet, so it's been dummied down. This is not the actual data. This is a dummied down version for the internet. But even though it does have that dummied down version, it's still very high resolution, as you can see. This is the underlying data, and then here it is back with the color on it. And there's the full scale casting pattern as it was milled that we used to make the replica. You can see side by side here, the left is the original, the right is our replica. You can see the left is the wing is the original, right is the replica. And then here, if this works, it's not working. Okay. That was supposed to be an animation. Oh, it does work. All right, now's a good time to switch for the ASL interpreters. And I'm going to go into another reproduction. This is a museum exhibit that we made, an exhibit replica of the Mesa of the Republic, which is, as you can see, behind the Speaker of the House. In this case, the President was speaking, but any time the House of the Representatives is in session, this mace is there, and it's there to represent the power of the government. And they wanted to make an exhibition, so this is an exhibit in the office building of the House of Representatives, and since it's such a powerful object, so to speak, it can never be seen unless you're actually in an active session. So we made this replica. We started by going to the basement of the Capitol and scanning with this portable scan arm. You can see it's very shiny, high detail. And we were able to capture it in just a couple hours. There's the data. We had to do some engineering work to figure out how to make it. But using 3D printing, we're able to 3D print it. The one on the left is the original. The one on the right is the reproduction. The reproduction was 3D printed and then electroformed in copper and then nickel to give it this finish. We could have then plated it in silver, but by design, they did not want it to be in silver because silver would tarnish. They wanted this to be put in the exhibit and left there for 5 years without ever being touched. They didn't want it to tarnish, so we used nickel. Here's another image of it put together as finished piece. And let's see if this works. And it is. And again, this was not only was it useful in making the 3D model, but it's something that can be shared on the internet so people can see it up close and personal if they want. And it's hard to see because of the nature of its shape. But the eagle is really beautiful and something we're very proud to have been able to help with. So, and now I just need to find the presentation again. There we go. The next area I'm going to dive into is this is actually an online exhibit that was created for the Museum of Modern Art and the Art Institute of Chicago, where we used 3D scanning to examine these 4 Matisse back sculptures. So these sculptures were each created in clay and then cast in plaster and other material and bronze, but they were created over the span of about 25 years, 22 to 25 years. The one on the far left is the Matisse back 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And we scanned all of them, again with that same ferro arm, portable. And then we made the 3D models of each of them. And we're able to compare them various ways. This is a color map. Well, one on the far left is actually an overlay where we just took them in space and overlaid them. And then the ones on the right are color maps where it shows where they're the same and where they are different. What I want to show you next is the actual online exhibit. So this shows how we enabled them to make this online exhibit. This was done at least 10 years ago, probably longer, 15 years ago, but it's still up there. And it allows people to study and see these are the comparisons between the two. And what we were able to prove is that the first back made the second was the original. And then the second was actually a derivative of the first. And the third was a derivative of the second, and so on and so on. And here you can see they created this, or we created this actually. So there's the first back, and there's the second back, and here's the third back, and here's the fourth back. And one of the methods we used to prove this for them is we were able to overlay. And if you can see, these are cross sections of the different sculptures. And because they're so precisely matched, we have a high level of confidence that they were actually derivatives of one another. And there we go. Another project we did with a lot of comparison, which was pretty neat, was for the National Gallery of Art. The Degas Little Dancer has a long story. I'm not going to have time to tell the whole thing, but the wax sculpture, which you see here, was the only Degas sculpture ever shown in public. And then all of the other sculptures that exist are posthumous, or else there might have been some plasters that were lifetime plasters. And we did research. We scanned the wax, the plaster, what was known as thought to be a model, which a model would be the master bronze, and then one of the serial bronzes, which is they made reproductions from the master bronze. And our job was to compare all of these different sculpture representations to determine the shrink and growth rates between the plaster and the bronze, so they could try and determine some of the what came first and whether things were original, whether they were legitimate. Here you can see 4 of the sculptures side by side in the digital space. And if you can see, there's some lines. These are point clouds now, converted from the actual surface data to a point cloud. But the lines that you see are actually cross sections. And because these sculptures were all different scales, and because they warp in shrink and in growth, we had to figure out ways to really thoroughly analyze them. And the way we did that was by finding like spots, and those like spots were then used to create cross sections. So any 3 points that were similar on all of the objects were able to be used to create a cross section. And then those cross sections were then laid out side by side on top of each other. And with that, we were able to do some measurement and analyze with many different data points, get an average of shrinkage and growth. And that was all used to publish, was all published in their sculpture catalog. Another application is, and this is pretty simple, is for production of products and promotion. This is an example where a replica bronze series of the young Ben Franklin was made from digitization, 3D printing, and loss effects casting. This was for the University of Pennsylvania. Another area is accessibility, interactive tactile art reproductions. We can scan objects and make replicas that are precise out of either the same material or different. And then you have the ability to have the sight impaired be able to feel them and touch them. We were asked to, but we didn't get to do it. Actually do this with the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's enormous. And the idea was to have it scanned. We have already scanned it, but to use that data to create a small model so the sight impaired could feel the model and get an idea what it all looked like, but then also do a scaled model of, for example, one of the soldiers' faces, and they could feel that too. And they'd get then the ability to see and feel, to feel and interpret the scale and also the form of the sculpture. This is a neat project we did we scanned Native and American projectile points and 3D printed them. And then if you see them, they each all had a QR code attached to them. And those QR codes enabled the sight impaired to actually use their phones to read the QR code, and then the QR code would generate spoken word to describe what they were feeling and know the backstory. All right, the last area I want to talk about is the immersive AR and VR. So as we mentioned before, the modern internet is built to support 3D viewing 3D models. We've already seen some AR interpretations. The metaverse is coming. Another object-oriented thing we're talking about, I have a call actually later today, is to scan let's just say a historic object, I can't say anymore, and create an NFT from it. To our knowledge, no one's done that yet, but I know some people are talking about doing it, and it's an interesting way, in my opinion, to fund conservation and other cultural heritage efforts. More to come on that. This on the left is a digitized photogrammetry model of the removed Robert E. Lee Memorial from Richmond, Virginia, with the graffiti. On the right, it's actually in the metaverse. I did not have anything to do with creating any of this. I just am aware of it, and I think it's very cool because it's the first of its kind as far as we know. I want to show you this model. This is the model just on the internet, on Sketchfab. So this isn't metaverse. This is just an online model, and it's a pretty accurate, amazing work, and it's documenting a pretty historic moment in time. The next one I want to show you, if I can get to it. Here we go. So here it is in the metaverse. And what's most important to know about this is the artist, Terry Kilby, who created this. He has also created photogrammetry models of the Berlin Wall. So what you're seeing there is sections of the Berlin Wall. And he's created a online museum or a metaverse museum where you can go and explore these. So if you have an Oculus or an immersive, any sort of 3D immersive experience, you can go in and actually walk around in this museum and see it. It's the first of its kind as far as I know. Doesn't mean it's the first of its kind, but it's an interesting example of real world objects being brought into this metaverse, which is so kind of a hot topic that no one knows what's really going to become of it. And so, summing up, back to things to remember. There's a variety of digitization tools and methods. No singular approach or tool can do everything. All these tools are getting better, faster, more reliable, more affordable. Sometimes when your challenges have to be done right, it might not be ready. You might want to wait. Be objective. Get opinions from different perspectives. And don't do it unless you know exactly who you're doing it for and why. I also would say it's okay to do it just to practice, but understand that if you're going to get involved, it takes practice, and it takes practice to stay in practice and do it well. It can't hurt to learn a little bit, but what we don't like to see is when people take on projects that are really not ever having a chance for success. There's many things that are becoming easy and accessible, which makes it easy for us to do a lot more for our customers, but still not everything's easy, and it really matters what you're trying to accomplish. Thank you for watching, and I'm Harry Abramson from Direct Dimensions.
Thank you, Harry. Appreciate it. We have a few questions, and it's sort of the thing that it seems, of course, on the top of everyone's mind is what drives costs with this kind of a thing? What are the costs, dependent on the size and so forth? And where do you find funding to support this? I think, since this is directed at smaller museums, what kinds of things can and should they be doing in terms of 3D that's affordable?
It's an amazing, great question. And first, I want to go back to referencing what Carla said last week, and I'm saying today. There are easy ways to do this, and the camera is a great place to start because it can do amazing things. It doesn't have a $100,000 price tag, and generally all of the museums have someone that knows how to use a camera. So experimenting with that is an easy way to get started. We use it all the time. It's very important for doing excellent work, but it also is an easy way to do starter set work as well. When you say what drives cost, I think the things that drive cost are things like travel expenses and how long does it take to be off site. The main thing I think that drives cost is resolution and accuracy requirements. So to make a visualization model only that is going to look good on the internet is, generally speaking, a lot easier than making a conservation level model, which has to have sub-millimeter accuracy. So when you look back to the Smithsonian's project with the Neil Armstrong spacesuit, they raised $500,000 with a Kickstarter to fund that. And again, that's all in-house. They did that themselves. They have all the tools, they have the knowledge, and they did it themselves. But it still took time and money and effort to do it. And they probably had to, took a lot of time. One of the things I was thinking about this morning as I was preparing for this, a good way to think of this is when you're dealing with millimeters, the difference between doing a large object at 2 millimeters versus 1 millimeter, it's only twice as good, but it might cost 5 or 10 times as much. Maybe not at 2 to 1 millimeter, but when you get down to 0.5 millimeter versus 1/4 millimeter, it can really get expensive because your margin for error is different. And of course, that all is dependent on the object itself, the complexity of the object. Is it rigid? Is it shiny? The cost drivers really are having to do with the purpose. And I think that's why there's this cautionary tale. Don't spend $20,000 to do something and find out later it needed to be $100,000. On the other hand, you can do something for next to nothing, meaning like literally go out with the camera and use very low cost software and make amazing models that are very good and can be very effective even for conservation if you know what you're doing.
Do you find that there's a threshold that would sort of either in-house versus hiring a vendor like yourself? I mean, is it the number of objects that you want to digitize, so that if you've got a whole bunch of those, it might make sense to hire a staff and buy equipment to do that versus sending it to, or bringing you guys in or sending it out to you all? Is there sort of a threshold there, or is it just kind of a, in your case, size probably matters, right?
Well, no, it's a great question again. We do say, for example, hey, we're flying all the way to Iowa to scan, one thing. We got the tool there. It only takes 2 hours to scan it. Why don't we scan some more stuff? And we generally don't charge extra for that scanning. Scanning usually is about 1/10 to 1/4 of the time in processing. It really depends. So there's the modeling time. Modeling often can stretch out over time. So for us, if you hire us, you give us more time to do it, we're gonna charge you less and we can put it off until we have the free time. So volume matters, but really it's a level of effort, and level of effort doesn't change when we have to do more stuff. We have, still have to do all the work. I think the main thing for a small museum to consider is, I just lost my view there. You still there?
Here.
Is in-house, you're never going to have all the tools. You're never going to have the ability to invest in, we're going to buy a scanner and hire a guy and then do everything we need. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start. It doesn't mean there aren't some scanners. Again, the camera is a great place to start. But it takes time to really understand the variables, and it's very hard to have someone that's full-time doing it all the time that's good enough to actually do it. Not in the museum space, but in the industrial space. We've had it happen so many times when someone will buy, an industrial scanner for $100,000, and then they don't know how to use it because they don't use it enough. And then we come to their facility and scan with their scanner, and it's silly, but we don't push it on them. It's just that you really have to be good at it to be good at it. I think the tools are getting better, faster, cheaper. Photogrammetry and all the things you can do with a camera really are a great place to start.
Questions has to do with the materials and types of surfaces that are maybe are some better than others for scanning. Are there some that are just absolutely impossible to get a good read on, or is pretty much anything fair game?
Well, in the cultural heritage space, we don't like to touch anything. So, for example, if we're scanning a car and it has glass windows, we can spray that car with a material that makes it opaque, or we can put tape and then we can see where the glass is. But in the museum space, we don't like to do that. So glass and things that are translucent and transparent are very hard or not ideal. Things that are matte, things that are not complex, like I like to say, a banana isn't complex. A bunch of bananas is kind of complex. A basket of fruit is really complex. So the complexity makes it a lot harder to capture. Surface texture with photogrammetry in particular, if you're scanning like anything that's stone and opaque, it's gonna really work well. Anything with a lot of texture is gonna work really well. But on the other hand, if you try and scan a white PVC pipe with photogrammetry, it's going to be very hard to tell what you got unless you have other things around it to help define what that pipe is. So it really depends on the tool. That arm that you saw scan with scans shiny very well. Photogrammetry, it's very hard to scan shiny, for example.
Project flow. And so if I'm a museum and I've got a couple of objects that I would like to have scanned and you guys coming in to do it, what kinds of things would best be, what do we need to do to get it prepped for you? How many, what kind of management do we need to deal with?
The most important thing is, and we're dealing with this right now with some projects, is you want it all in one place. So, object handlers are important. They're the limiting factor because we're not going to touch anything. So you have to have the right people set up. You have to have everything in the right location. We tend to prefer a dark room, or at least one that has controlled light. So if we have direct sunlight, it can mess things up. We need to have rigid, it depends on how we're doing it, but if we're using that arm that you saw that we were scanning with, you really have to have a rigid floor. We've done some work where we were doing high-end work, and the train would drive by and you could see it in the data, or a truck would drive by and you could see it in the data because the movement creates, blur in the 3D space. But not all scanners have that problem. But generally, controlled light, sturdy table, sturdy floor, enough room, which depends on the object. And we don't want to have to do a lot of setups in different places because that just adds to time and effort.
In general terms, you do want to have stuff pulled out of storage and spotted into like a studio environment type of thing, or can you just go into storage and take care of it?
Like you saw the Mesa of the Republic, that was brought into a storage area in the basement. That was just a museum storage area that they had, but they set it up there. It was perfect. We could turn the lights out. We didn't have to. We do scan in situ often. We scanned the Wax Little Dancer right there in the gallery. We scanned the George Washington right there in the gallery. Obviously that's a huge piece, but very often that we can scan in situ. If possible, like when we did a lot of the other Degas stuff, we set up back in their conservation office and they paraded all of the pieces through, and we had one set up and they just kept bringing them through, kept things moving very quickly.
Right. Okay, I'm going to get philosophical here with you for a second. You mentioned NFTs, and the question that I actually had was, what is actually digitizing an object do to its value? This is really kind of an interesting question, right? Because you've now got the digital thing that could be turned into an NFT, which it represents some sort of value, and then you've got the original here. Is that something that is I don't know, it's like, I guess it has to do with, is any of this possibly monetized by a museum somehow? Is there...
I've been having this conversation lately, and I'm not an expert in NFTs, and I don't know if anyone really is. Some people have made some money, but for example, I like to say NFTs are like baseball cards. Some of us get it and some of us don't. I don't particularly care about baseball cards, but I believe that there's a market for it, and I believe that scarcity makes value in that market. And that's generally how I see NFTs. The issue with NFTs is, like you said, it is a digital. How do you know my digital scan of the Lincoln Memorial is the digital scan of the Lincoln Memorial? And I can't tell you that. I mean, mine might be better, someone else's, but who's the authority that defines that that's the one? As far as changing the value of the original, I'll tell a funny story that is absolutely true. I had a guy call me a long time ago that had some silk screens that were Andy Warhol's that were not Andy Warhol artwork because they were things that he made as decorations for a party. And he wanted us to scan these silk screens to say, these are Andy Warhol. And then, but the Andy Warhol in states like, they're not Andy Warhol's because Andy Warhol didn't say they were Andy Warhol's. And that's the truth. So that's one point. It's like, it is what it is only because it is. Secondly, that Assyrian relief replica I made, it might be the best Assyrian relief replica of its kind, but it's worth nowhere near and never will be what the original was, because the original is 3,000 years old and was made by those folks. We made ours out of concrete, and it will never, ever represent the real thing in value. So when we talk to insurance companies, for example, sure, we can scan it, but we're never going to replace it. You can't replace it. You can only replicate it.
Well, Harry, I'm going to say to you, I think you've just signed up for at least one conference session somewhere along the line here in the next couple of years. As this technology emerges, the ethical issues, of course, creep up as well. And that's something, of course, that we in the museum field are all about, is trying to talk this through. So we're out of time, Harry. I have one last question for you in terms of a housekeeping. Will you be able to share your PowerPoint as part of the materials that's going to be on our Museum Learning Hub? If you could do that, I think that'd be terrific, because then people can take a look at some of the examples and the like that might be very, very helpful.
Yes, I will. I will do that. I also will try and put together a little resource page that shows anything that I pointed to. And also, my information's here. Email away. I didn't put my phone number up there, but if I'm just a phone call away, and that's my job. My job is not to sell. My job is to help. People call me all the time, and we hear what their problems are. We address them. We see if it's feasible, and if it is, it moves forward. Lots of times we're telling people no, never going to happen. Run away.
Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you so much.
Really do appreciate it. Very, very stimulating. And, like I said, I'm sure we'll see you at a Museum Association conference somewhere in the future.
Call me.
Thank you again, Harry. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 40th and final installment in the Digital Empowerment Project series that began 10 months ago in April of last year. Since then, we've had thousands of people attend from around the US and beyond, and we've built a robust community of museum people who have joined our forum and watched recordings of the webinars at museum-hub.org. If you're not part of it already, I encourage you to join today and be part of the crowd. Many thanks to all the people who have made the Digital Empowerment Project possible, including the ASL interpreters, transcribers, and the DEP technical fellows who have supported the project, and of course to our advisory group of more than a dozen museum professionals from around the country who helped us create and review the project. Thank you as well to our technical advisor, Nancy Proctor, and my dear friends and collaborators at the regional museum associations who spent countless hours planning and producing the webinars, especially our project leader, Charity Counts, from the Association of Midwest Museums. And a special thanks once again to the Institute of Museum and Library Services for their inspiration and funding support for the program. Thanks again, everyone. Be well.